Chapter 4 Sensa. Sensa's eyes fluttered open to a room bathed in morning light. A wash of birdsong from the aviary ebbed and peaked through the sound of the castle preparing for the day. Her sleep had been light with anxiety, and she woke desirous of the day's events. Keen to meet her fate, she rose from her bed only to tumble, tangled in her own robe, to the floor. She pulled herself up out of the bedrobe, in a huff, making her way toward the window. There had been more important things than perfectly fitted robes of recent and autumn fall, or at least it did not feel proper to gripe of an ill-fitting robe. The strikes had much and more to be concerned with. Her palms resting on the stone windowsill, Sensa reached outward, drinking in the dawn of Emperor's Crossing. The air was filled with the warmth of the kitchen smoke, scents of bacon and bread wafting through the air. Winter felt a world away here. Today she would really meet Geoffrey, King Geoffrey Bartholomew, ruler of the Nine Lands, her betrothed. Sensa would sit beside the king on the royal pavilion as an equal, not as some foreigner, dirty from the road, but as the future queen. It was almost more than she could bear to anticipate. Sensa's thoughts were interrupted as the door was pushed open, the iron hinges announcing the entry with their distress. Her handmaiden was to arrive this morning, though she had not meant to greet her naked. She turned only to see the Pound. The Pound, standing still in her doorway. In his ceremonial armor, Sender Clegone looked almost a foot taller than when they had shared the road. His cloak hung heavy upon his, in the Bartholomew brown and gold. Seeing her before him unattired, he had already averted his eyes, and thus turned his scarred face turned from her. Though he was obviously troubled by the mark, Sensa did not think it marred him at all. "Forgive me, my lady," Sir Sender offered. "I entered unannounced." So he had, and with what purpose? He seemed embarrassed for it now, though. How he expected to catch her at daybreak, Sensa could not guess. "Good morning, Sir Sender," Sensa offered. "You needn't conceal yourself from me." The Pound dropped his head further. "But perhaps you should. Your robe." The shock had been so much that she had almost forgotten, though she did not feel entirely uncomfortable. She felt tickled to see the brave Sir Sandor, friend and protector of the king, so disarmed. Sir Sandor was of course Sir Sender's squire, always accompanying him in the battlefield and in women's bedchambers. Suddenly, Sir Sandor clutched his chest. He grabbed for Sir Sender's protruding manhood as he fell, but it was too late. He was dead. The wolves came for his body, and Sensa returned her attention to Sir Sender. There was not a trace of his rough demeanor to her great naked body. Sensa moved back to the bed and gathered up her robe. "You are forgiven, my lord," she said, pulling her bedrobe back over herself. Even with his gaze averted, she could not help but think about being watched. "I have been sent to bring you before the king." Sensa sighed in delight despite herself, and looked toward her wardrobe, wondering after the whereabouts of that handmaiden. "I'll wait outside," he said, noticing her gaze. By the time her handmaiden arrived, Sensa had narrowed her options to 3 outfits. After the tournament, she would be moved into the Tower of Love with Shelia. "Shelia?" she thought. "Or is it Sheila?" Sensa was never the most clever among the strikes growing up. She had often neglected her studies to spend time in the kitchen cooking lemon cakes. "Oh, I always forget their names. Why must I be so stupid sometimes? So stupid. Oh." But she couldn't dwell. She would have quarters adjacent her own, but for now she was half a castle away, and they had hardly developed a rapport in the few days since the strikes had arrived in Emperor's Crossing. As composed as she no doubt came across, Sensa could not help feel like she should say something to Shelia or Sheila, whatever, but so far she hadn't been able to figure out what exactly she wanted to say. Lack of polite conversation aside, it was not long before she was ready. Her strawberry blonde hair shone against the grey-blue velvet dress. She had anticipated the prime ministerial tournament her entire journey to Emperor's Crossing. It would also be her first opportunity to talk to King Geoffrey. Though she had only met him once so far, he was all a king must be. Striking, handsome, and fair, King Geoffrey could not have been a more perfect match, and she could not have been more in love with him. Sensa inspected herself in the mirror. "Thank you, Sheila. This is lovely. Fetch me some breakfast quickly. I fear Sir Sandor means to drag me off." Sensa giggled at correctly guessing her handmaiden's name, before being struck by an excellent idea. "Maybe a lemon cake or two?" "Of course, my lady," Sheila responded, exiting Sensa's chambers. Several minutes later, the door burst open, and Sir Sandor strode in, with a plate full of lemon cakes. "I've brought gifts to repay for my intrusion earlier," he said. They sat down. There was something about the way he looked at her that made Sensa pause. Does he prefer her in this dress? Does he enjoy how it sits on her budding figure? She felt a mix of regal and sexy, and wondered what the other women would think of her. The two politely spoke while breakfast was eaten, and as Sensa was reaching for her third lemon cake, Sender recounted to her how it was he came by his facial scar. "When the king and I were younger, we had gone hunting. We managed to sneak out of the castle in the garb of simple folk, and had ourselves quite a nice day of sport in the forest. On the way home, we were attacked by bandits who did not recognize." "Recognize what?" she asked. "Recognize the king, you dimwit!" he snapped. "My lady, the story, I apologize." Unconsciously, the Pound's hand trailed along the outline of his scar. There was a faraway look in his eye, a look that was not entirely painful. "You saved his life," Sensa stated. It was obvious he loved the king like a brother. "Maybe. Either way, we escaped with our lives, though I was marked for life by a bandit's blade." The knight pushed himself away from the table where they had been sitting. "I think it's high time you meet your betrothed. If you will follow me, my lady, I am sure you will find King Geoffrey's face a good deal more attractive than my own." Sensa allowed herself to be escorted through the castle, her mind a mix of emotions as she considered the relationship between Geoffrey and Sender. When the two entered the throne room, Sensa had to stop herself from gasping. The Pound had been right. King Geoffrey was positively beautiful. "This would complicate things,"